You're watching Medfield TV.
Well, good evening and welcome to the August 29th Medfield Board of Selectmen meeting. I'd remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, so any members of the audience have anything to say during the meeting, please identify yourself. Grab a microphone first, then identify yourself for any comments. To start the meeting, just like to ask us to take a moment to remember the service members across the world that are serving the country in various assignments. Thank you. Okay, we have the first item here is actually a postponed item. We had a 7 p.m. appointment with John McKaylee of 39 Quarry Road. He's asked that we postpone our meeting with him until our meeting next Tuesday night. However, I asked Christine to keep the topic on the agenda because I'd like to have a general discussion of kind of the legal footing around rights of way. Not necessarily, I don't want to talk about his specific case because he deserves a chance to come in and provide whatever information he wants to provide in terms of his particular situation. But given that it's only a result of this issue that I've even begun to think I'm grasping what the legal footing is around rights of way and citizens looking for damages. Mark, I was hoping you could help us here. So a couple things. First off, I'll start by throwing out my understanding of general conditions around this, which is for most streets, the town has a right-of-way that allows for hydrants to be put in place, sidewalks to be put in place, and basically allows the town to do the things that the town needs to do. And so the first question I have is, are there limits or are there rights that private property owners have to unilaterally do things on that right-of-way that would actually potentially put the town on the hook for liability for damages?
Well, let me just step back for a minute preliminarily, because this is an old town and there are a lot of old roads. You have to distinguish between old roads that were just accepted by a town meeting at some point in time, where really what the town has is simply a right-of-way, versus the more recent process whereby we obtained rights of ownership with a layout, a whole process, which has been the process that you're most familiar with from recent town meetings, where we actually acquire ownership of the road. And not just the road, but it's actually a layout which extends usually beyond the paved portion. And so that's town-owned property, and per statute, private parties do not have any rights to do anything that interferes with the municipality's maintenance of those rights of way. So the most common issue is mailboxes, because people are caught between a rock and a hard place. The U.S. Postal Service has regulations that requires mailboxes to be accessible, and the only way you can do that is actually to impinge on the right-of-way. So probably virtually every mailbox in the town is located within what is the town's right-of-way. The corollary of what I've just said is, if somebody suffers damage to property, private person damage that they put into the right-of-way, they have no right to recover because they had no right to put it there in the first place. And in fact, the municipality would have a right to have it removed if they so chose. So it's not unlike a discussion we had going back to the basketball. We've had other activities, sprinkler heads and things. We've given licenses under certain circumstances to allow some impingement into the right-of-way. There's a stone wall right over here at the condominiums. It's actually in the public way, and it per a license agreement. So that's kind of the overview.
And Christine, from a policy, so we talked, and this is, I really had not understood any of this until this particular issue came up. So my purpose here is actually, as much as anything, to get information out to the public who happen to be watching this, to make sure that the three of us have some shared understanding of what the legal, at least the legal foundation of this discussion will be. and because I didn't ever understand it before, I've had people come up to me and talk about the harsh treatment they got from the town for not replacing their fancy mailboxes, and I was, at the time, pretty sympathetic to them, so I actually have learned a lot this summer about this. The policy, as you and I think, have talked about it, is that should a mailbox be actually hit by a plow, so it's the direct impact of a plow on the mailbox, then the town will reimburse, I think currently $75, which is the cost of a standard mailbox and a standard pole.
Correct.
If the mailbox falls over as a result of being hit by a wall of snow that the plow throws at the mailbox, that's on the owner. And that's basically the one policy that I think we have. My purpose here was to get this out to the public. I'd actually like this summarized in the minutes, not particularly in preparation for next week, but just we've kind of memorialized where we stand on this in the essence, because I've gone for years without ever understanding any of this. You two are both
It would
lawyers,
be
you
one
probably
of those,
understood, but I
it
sure
would be
didn't.
one of those things that would be good, is if we could have somewhere memorializing policies of this sort, of the Board of Selectmen, so that if anybody is ever interested, they can click on the town website and see.
So any of the ones that you have approved since I have taken over are all on the website under Board of Selectmen policies.
And I think Mo, I think Mo has talked about adding kind of an FAQ section to the
Yes,
DPW webpage that would have
That- yeah, that'd be a
questions
good place for
specific.
it.
I mean, I agree with Pete that this should be memorialized in an official procedure or policy. But then on top of that, I think Mo had said he might do an FAQ, and this is because a lot of these things come up regularly,
Yeah.
and you can pop it up there, and you can just see, okay, here's, and then it'll link you to the
you're
policy.
going to see quite a few of them in his fall newsletter as we go into the winter season, reminding people of what our snow policies are and how we do our plowing.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I didn't have this conversation to pre-bias. We're gonna come in and we're gonna get some information next week, and we should look at it open-mindedly.
If I might just expand somewhat on the common myth perception. The other interesting one is potholes and other defects in roadways. And by statute, municipalities, first of all, the damages are capped at $5,000 no matter what kind of damage is done. And number two, you have to establish that either the town actually knew about it and didn't do anything to repair it, or that it existed for an unreasonable length of time. And kind of a corollary to that is if there's road construction going on and the town posts any kind of a sign that puts motorists on notice that there is construction, there is no liability for that either, so.
Yeah, I actually learned that one a few years ago when I blew my two left tires up in Everett in front of the power station. And what it was is a manhole that the
Raised.
square, actually it was the square asphalt apron had been dug out. So I'm in traffic, I hit both wheels by the time I'm a quarter mile up the road, both tires are flat. And then when I went to file the claim, because the road was not closed, but I did learn if those signs you see that road legally closed and you don't know why, so they're not liable for that. When I called, the answer I got back was, well, which manhole was it? Was it Boston Water, Boston Sewer, Boston Electric? And I discovered that there is a stretch of road right by the Everett Power Plant that has about 15 manholes, and so it covers. I found which one it was. The security guy from the plant came out because he saw me taking pictures of the road in front of his power plant, and I never get paid. I never get anything for it.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, may I suggest, before we get a bunch of messages from our large viewing audience at home, that you might introduce the young gentleman down at the end
Yes,
of
yes.
the table, as I'm sure there's a lot of curiosity. There may be tweeting and texting and Facebooking right now as people want to know who that is. So
Yeah,
why don't we
yes.
put to rest any of the rumors that are currently circulating out there and introduce him?
Christine, would you like
So
to introduce him?
I would like to
Okay.
introduce Nicholas Milano, who is our new Assistant Town Administrator. Nick started August 19th.
So Nick, I tried to cover for you as the anonymous person that nobody could send complaints to, but the holiday is over. You're now a full-blown member of the town staff. And,
I'll talk about your mailbox policy.
that's for anyone out there, that's Milano. All right, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great having you on board. Okay, next item we had was citizen comment. Don't all rush to the no citizen comment. Okay, so we'll keep going. Action items. First letter was to vote to sign the letter to DCAM from the Medfield State Hospital. True to form, I have some edits. So, and they're correction type edits. They're not, I thought the letter was good. And-
I think John is here to speak to the letter if you want a brief
Okay,
update.
As we went over in the last meeting, John Thompson, Chairman of Buildings and Grounds, this letter is designed to bring DCAM back to the table with the town to talk about the condition at the Overlook Park, to get them to do more work out there, and also to engage with DCAM on building a new access road from Hospital Road into the Overlook Park. So we had already talked about it. This is what we've put together. We tried to put as much documentation behind the letter so that when she reads it, when the commissioner reads it, she understands some of the basis for that. So,
Okay.
that's it.
any comments, Mike?
I didn't have any edits on it, no.
I thought it was a very good tone to the letter, and I think it focuses her on their deficits, and
Yeah, thanks. Peg Stofa helped the town, and Bill and I with Christine draft this letter.
Right. Yeah, the only comment I had was just to regularize the font in the
I've
letter.
already- yeah,
Yeah, because there's two different fonts in the letter, but other than that.
Yes. Get the microphone there, John.
Is there a reason, Chris, why Senator Feeney isn't noted on at least on the sheets that I have?
No, I'll make sure, I'll double check and make sure he's included. No, not intentional.
And interesting, I was doing this from the airport last night, and I was using in PDF, I was using the highlighter, which looked really good on my screen, but as I'm looking at it, all my highlighted comments didn't print out. There were a couple of, I can get them to you
Yeah,
after the
just email
meeting.
it to me.
The one most important one, actually, you've already changed it. You made it the trustees of the reservation. Okay, that was the main substantial thing that I thought had to change. Okay? So I thought it was a good letter. I think we need to get it to them sooner rather than later and see if we can't get that meeting set up. So if we need to approve it, entertain a motion.
so moved.
I second.
Thank you.
Guess I moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was like a curveball, you guys. You moved it before. So moved, second, got it. All right. Next is a discussion of the town administrator evaluation process. And I think this was on, Christine, you want to start on this discussion?
Sure. So I submitted to all three of you an update to the goals that were in place from January, realistically February through June 30th. And you were going to review and let me know how you wanted to continue with the evaluation process.
Okay, and do we have, I thought there was a recommendation that came in from somebody on how to do that.
We
or-
were talking with Mark about
Okay.
the best way to do that.
So based on that, I think Mark, your suggestion for this 6-month evaluation is that we individually meet with Christine to evaluate, provide our individual evaluations to her, that there's no real need in this, at least interim, for us to formally document that or do any sort of a formal process. So we'll give Christine our individual feedback, and basically that will be the process for getting through the 6-month
For the
review.
6 months,
If everybody, you both are okay with that?
since we're
Yes.
in month 8.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine with me.
okay. So can I suggest we target having that done by the end of September?
And each of us meet with Christine by the
Yeah,
end of
we may
September.
do it sooner than that, but I'm just picking a deadline that we know for sure that we get that done by the end of September.
Okay.
Yep.
Do
Next,
we want to go over any of the goals and objectives?
for 2020 I do, but are you talking about the
The ones
past
for the
ones?
past ones, or no?
We established them, we approved them, so.
No, I know, but she's given us sort of an update on what she did, and whether we want to talk about any of the, do you have that?
We do have it. If there's, I mean, it's not an evaluation, so if we're having a discussion, I guess we can discuss it, but this is not a, if we're gonna do individual evaluations, we need to do individual evaluations, so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if we don't, that's fine, I mean,
I'm happy to talk. You
No,
want to, okay.
no,
All right.
that's fine. I mean, I think at some level, there ought to be some public memorialization of our view of whether the goals and objectives have been achieved, right? Because,
Well, that's what I'm basically saying is I don't think we're gonna do that on the 6-month. We're gonna do the 3 individuals, because we haven't really established some formal process for doing that memorialization, so.
okay,
I did bring some materials, if you want them, to familiarize yourself with the current state of the law.
Yeah, sure.
So, what I have is 3 things. One is an article by Attorney Kevin Batt from Anderson and Krieger, who's a colleague of mine, kind of giving an overview. And then the backup to that is a 2-page frequently asked questions from the Attorney General's Division of Open Government. And finally, a full copy of the Supreme Judicial Court case from April of 2018, Bolter versus Board of Selectmen of Wayland, which basically the SJC overruled the AG and established new law, so 2,
And the
3.
part, just isn't, so the.
Thank you.
There. Yeah, the part that baffled, Mark, we talked about this, so this isn't, I appreciate you pulling this forward. The part that baffles me is that it appears the SJC's rulings actually violate federal law, which is the part that I'm wrestling with, is how do you respect the privacy of any individual in their performance evaluation, and a judge just
Public
suddenly comes along
employees
and
give up
rules it, so.
a high degree of privacy by reason of working in the public sector.
Well, I don't think the federal law makes that exception. I mean, I'm not arguing with you. But I don't think the federal law makes
I'm
that
only the
exception, so-
messenger here.
Yeah,
None of
that's why
this
I'm,
is,
right, so my point is, that's why I'm being cautious about what we do here, because when, at some point, we will have to figure out how to properly memorialize things. And the way that's gonna be is gonna be some sort of, I think, a bottom line evaluation that brings our 3 evaluations together into a public document, but probably not a complete memorialization of the deep, in-depth conversations that we have with Christine as individuals. So I'm just trying to balance complying with the law.
if you have individual discussions, and even if there were documents related to that and they were not shared, they just went directly to her and went into her personnel file, that would be protected.
Right.
But it's once unfortunately, you start to exchange among yourselves,
Right,
it triggers the open meeting law.
right. So that's kind of that's where the boundary lines are, and if we don't worry about fixing that for the first 6 months, we'll have to figure it out by the annual review for sure.
okay.
Okay? 20,
I will say that I don't think we should fire Christine or terminate her contract.
and,
So I don't think
do we have a
should-
motion?
I don't think we should revoke any of
Yes.
those portions of
Yeah.
that, so.
You know, I almost asked that question just to confirm whether we were, everybody would know where we were at here, but, yeah, I think,
Right. Not to preview my feedback to her, but I don't think we should fire her.
I can
or
see that
terminate
she's
the
gotten
contract.
far more relaxed looking over there since that one statement of support came
Yeah.
from Mike, so
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
glad you brought that part of it up.
All right.
I
So you want
think
to talk about the policies for this year?
Yes, let's do that. That we can talk about.
So the one overarching comment I had was just, there's a few things to be carried through, because one of the goals from this half year was to identify the policies and procedures that you would then develop in this full year.
Correct, that
And
needs to be added.
That
in.
didn't really get carried, the actual development of those priority policies and procedures did not get carried forward. I thought it was a major category.
Yeah, I'll
that
put that in
was-
there. We've actually already started working on, most of them should have them too within the next few meetings to start reviewing.
Okay. And then, do you mind if I just go through?
Go,
them?
keep,
So-
yeah, keep going.
So on the, because it's part of the year, I would say, for next year on the capital, I mean, under our existing policy, the process is supposed to start in June. And so for this year, obviously deliver the plan by November, but then for the next year's capital cycle to begin on time in June. You had in here the minutes, getting the minutes to us by the next meeting. You said within 1 week, that's fine. I was gonna say before the next meeting. I think once we're caught up on the minutes, we should be in the habit of getting them at the next meeting and approving them at the next meeting, because it's such a pain to do them. So it becomes a daunting task the more you're backed up. Let me see. The other thing that was not on here was the hospital.
Yes.
I noted an absence of, of the hospital on here. And so I wouldn't put as any of the goals, any particular outcome with respect
Right,
to the
but
hospital. I think
continued discussion.
conducting this, the town meeting, implementing whatever the judgment of the town meeting is, preparation for the town meeting, oversight of that, I think is a significant goal for the year. And then some of these I just had questions about what they were. Like the new reverse 911 system. What is
So
that?
we currently have a
I don't
reverse.
remember a discussion of that
No.
before.
We have been trying for the last year and a half to update the reverse 911 system we have. We actually utilized it today. I think it's the first time we've used it in over 5 years. The system we have is incredibly costly. We pay an annual fee as well as what they call a campaign fee. So that call today probably ran about $1,500 in addition to what we pay every year. We actually have the opportunity to do an add-on to our website system. They do an emergency notification. It's much easier for the staff to use. It's the same interface as the website, and we don't pay per call or campaign. We would just pay. We actually have a meeting set up on September 6th, which was set up prior to today, to have a review of that to finalize that.
Okay.
And we've been working, unfortunately, with the changes in police and fire, I've been waiting till everybody was on board so that I wasn't making the decision on an emergency notification system that they would end up hating.
Okay. Then under communications,
Mhm.
I would just delete the second one and continue to improve public relations, because I think everything that's in 3 captures what you'd be doing under 2.
Sure.
And I don't think you intend to be in public relations in terms of like trying to spin people on things or.
No,
kind of,
no,
you
no.
know, I don't know what that would mean in the municipal context. It's not in sort of the glad handing sense of public relations. It's more really what's in number 3, communication, accessibility.
And my intent of that was more making sure that people are getting notified within 24 hours when they call with a concern or a complaint,
Yep.
making sure we're addressing that.
Right.
that kind of
And in that you suggest, I have the same question you had on that one, but in that you're suggesting eliminate it, Pete, do you have any problem with dropping it?
No, I might even just change it to, based on what Chris just said, to improve consumer relations. I mean, that's consumer service, I mean, is what we want. It's better consumer service when people call and ask for something.
If you want, so I'm okay either way, dropping it or going there, but then the only thing I think if you're gonna do customer service, then you should define the metrics so that we know what that means. If it's the 24, if the target is we want 24-hour response, that's great. I think if I've seen any comments from people about not, breaks or weak customer service, it has to do with how long it takes to get response back. It's not politeness or any of that other stuff, so. You okay with that? Change it to customer service, Mike?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's
Yeah.
fine with me.
So the hospital wasn't on there, and then, the other thing just under economic development is I would just add, and again, sort of develop a plan to develop a plan, for North Street and Park Street, which are kind of, and so we have this kind of pending, sort of perpetually pending, but someday coming reconstruction of North Street, as part of which there's gonna have to be communication and thinking about how it can positively affect all the businesses that are on North Street because of the different ways. I know Mo is kind of working on that and trying to make that efficient, but I think as we think about kind of committees and things that we have, I think the targeted areas where we need a plan, whether it's a plan with a committee or just a plan generally, are on North Street and Park Street. And some of that folds into the master planning process as well, but those are kind of the 2.
So Mike, I had Park Street, listening to you talk about North Street. This is economic development relative to the coordination for the work that's anticipated on North Street. So that's what we're not trying to expand businesses on North Street
No,
necessarily.
just to
Okay.
keep them open.
No,
because the
yeah, keep them
construction
open
is-
and then taking into account the
Yeah.
needs of the businesses when looking at that reconstruction, because if, under some of the ways the state would have you reconstruct the road,
Mhm.
I think their view would be you might lose some parking spaces or go to
Yep.
kind of parallel, not parallel, horizontal
Yeah.
parking,
Yeah.
which would hurt the businesses that are right there. And so
Okay.
trying to figure out ways to kind of navigate both of those and making sure we get input as that's looked at. That's
Pete,
what I have from
You okay with those two? Adding?
Yes, oh, yes, yes.
And that's it.
Okay, Pete? Anything
So I
else?
just mentioned that I'm happy to see the 5-year capital plan. I'm not quite sure what consolidates cell phone contracts. I'm assuming that means there are a bunch of different cell phone contracts for town employees.
We currently have individual cell phone contracts for all
Okay,
cell
yeah.
phones in the town. We're working on with the IT department and the fire department to consolidate all of those into one
Yep.
plan.
And then-
We're also moving to the AT&T FirstNet so that it's created for public safety. So we have access, if there's an emergency, we're bumped up to a higher level of service. And would have more connectivity. So Nick and I will be getting work cell phones as well as some of the other key department heads so that we can stay in contact.
Good idea. And you, under human resources, your first item is implement evaluation process for department heads and hourly employees. I thought there already was a evaluation process for the hourly employees.
No, so we're just
Oh.
implementing that now. We started that was part of the 6-month goals, is to start having department heads and hourly employees come up with goals, and we're continuing that program. But there'll also be some input from the personnel board on that as well.
But there already, isn't there some sort of yearly evaluation for, employee evaluation for all of the employees,
No.
not the department?
No.
There wasn't. Shame on me for not knowing that. I like that you're pushing developmental training for the staff. I think that's great. I like the idea of the summer internships a lot. I have no idea what you're under personal development, ICMA, that's some sort of management group, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And then I'm not quite sure what the economic development, the shared parking is, but I like the idea that you're looking at the parking and trying to figure it out downtown, so.
Basically building off what we talked about at the last meeting in terms of parking.
That's it.
So I had more. Number 3 under financial, that's the integration of ClearGov. You may recall when we first had that contract that the state was paying for, we talked about having metrics on how people use it. Do we have any feedback on how the public is using ClearGov?
We haven't used it yet. The
Okay,
timing wise with the fiscal year 19 budget process and not having the staff to do it, we never kicked off that process.
so is the state still paying for the first?
They've already paid for it, and Nick's actually started working with ClearGov on implementing that. It was
But
supposed
they
to be.
paid for the coming year, or did they pay for the year that we didn't use it?
We haven't done anything with it, so
Okay.
they're still honored in the contract to offer us a
Okay.
year of service.
Okay,
Um,
so,
Unfortunately, with the staff in the accounting department last year leaving and
Yeah.
the transition, we weren't able to kick it off. so.
that's okay, as long as, so for Nick's benefit, a year or so ago when this first came up, this is set up where the state pays for the first year of it, but then after that, you take it on. My view was that if ClearGov as a tool has functionality that would support the budget preparation process internal to the town, and then in addition to that, allows the public to see what's going on, I was all for it. At the time, when I talked to ClearGov, all it was glorified PowerPoint presentations for the public to look at. So the fact that the state was pre-feeding subscriptions that presumably would then be picked up by the budget, I was the skeptic, not because I'm skeptic of ClearGov or clear information, but I was a skeptic of this package. I believe since then, it's funny because at the Mass Municipal, I think it was this year's MMA, I still checked in January, to see whether they had the functionality for budget preparation. It was told by their people that they weren't, but then I saw the sample of how Natick is doing it from Jeremy. So
Yes.
I'm a little baffled when a guy using it knows that it exists, but their salespeople that go to conferences don't. So bottom line is, my biggest concern was around whether the public was really using it, if that was all that the tool was good for. If the tool actually has, if we're actually able to get on this tool and use it for transparent budget development, and it's useful for the departments to develop budgets, and useful for the warrant committee in looking at budgets, I'm fine with it. It's just that when we looked at it a year ago, that wasn't how it was stacking up, so, okay? Okay, okay, and for sure, we're not paying for it this year, so I'm still okay. Number 5, under finance, refine and expand the BOS budget policies. I wrote down, I don't know what this means. That doesn't mean I don't know what BOS budget policies are, but we have some of them, so I wasn't sure what the focus was. And that made me feel really stupid, seeing as I'm on the BOS, and I wasn't sure what we were doing. So what?
So, when we were reviewing the budget policy with the warrant committee and the financial team, we were putting it in place. We found there were some key dates that were missing.
Okay,
There's no date as to when you would measure your free cash, so we're just looking at those.
okay,
Kind
okay.
of treat it as an evergreen document and continue
That's
to change
fine.
it to make
Okay.
sure it's doing what it says it's doing.
Okay, it's not like we have any specific targets to expand into new policy areas.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. Under town operational, you answered the reverse 911, the very first one, installation, first one, installation of electric vehicle charging station in municipal parking lot. First question is, what does it cost? And second is, why are we doing it?
The Energy Committee has been asking both the Facilities Department and myself to do this at several municipal buildings. We're looking at trying to do a no-cost one at the back of Town Hall and have some of the businesses in town who are interested in doing it, do one here for us in the employee parking lot.
Okay.
Eversource will pretty much pay to have it put
Yeah.
in. It becomes a question as to who pays for the electricity that goes into
Right.
the vehicle.
So that's my next question. Who
Yep.
pays for the electricity that goes into the vehicle?
You can do it different ways.
So
How
we're
are we gonna do it?
still in the investigating phase of whether or not it's feasible to do.
Okay, okay,
I've pushed the Energy Committee off a little bit because we're gonna be doing a little bit of reconstruction and paving of the parking lots back here next summer. So it wouldn't make any sense to do this until we did that as part of that reconstruction.
okay. Is there anything tied in here with the town planning to buy electric vehicles, or, is there, in other words, if we're putting an electric charging station in a municipal lot, is that because we're gonna have cars that are electric, or are we just giving people free
In
electricity?
50
or-
years, you'll have nothing but electric vehicles.
That may be fine. In 50 years, we could talk about putting in charging stations. Here's where I'm coming from.
No, I know
We're
where you're
going into
headed.
a budget cycle that, as far as I can tell, we've almost casually stated we're gonna have to have an operating override if we wanna have capital investment. We already know we've got a $500,000 fire engine to buy. So if this is something that's just a nice-to-do thing with no clear purpose and no clear understanding of where the costs are landing, I'm starting the fight over the budget now. That's where I'm coming from. I like green, I like environmental stuff, but I don't like simply throwing in frivolous costs at a time when I'm already sitting there saying, how are we not gonna have an operating override this year? So that's,
What if we put in, instead of, in front of installation, explore?
I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm fine with that. And it sounds like effectively that's what we would be doing if we're gonna hold off on the parking lot.
Right.
So I don't have any problem. I would want answers to those questions. And if any of those answers involve increased cost to the town, I would want a clear explanation for why at this particular point in time, it's so urgent for us to do that, that we want to add those costs into the town budget. And anything else that comes up between now and next April, you're probably going to hear a similar line from me, because I'm sitting there saying, I don't know how we're going to pull a budget in and fund a capital budget and not have an operating override, so.
Just one issue on the electric vehicle charging stations, which is, I think that the free money to install them is limited, and so that if we don't get in by a certain time, it may disappear. So just
I think
understand that.
we'll explore it.
Yeah,
We'll explore it. Christine, you up for
Absolutely.
exploration?
okay. And then on number 3, this was just information. It said begin review of phone system, and I was just curious what improvements we're looking for. Right, but I don't have a problem with that. I just was
We're
curious.
looking for a cost savings.
Cost savings,
And the school department updated 3 of their phone systems, and we're looking at joining the schools and upgrading our system here to be compatible with them.
Okay. Down on communications, the first one, expand and increase communication with the board. And I wasn't sure oh, no, I get that, but I was saying, who needs to expand communications with us about what? Because I think you're doing pretty good. so
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I would just like to formalize more of a, either a weekly update. I know I
Oh,
individually
okay.
update you on things, but sometimes just a weekly update of what your schedule is looking like coming up, that's all.
okay. Well, if you want that goal there, I'm fine with that. That's great. And then I was curious on number 3, utilize existing tools within Civics Plus. I have no idea what Civics Plus is.
That's our current website platform.
Ah,
And there are tools within that platform that we are not utilizing
Okay.
to their fullest. So
okay.
actually, now that Nick's here, it was incredibly helpful today in getting our information out on EEE on that. Nick
Okay.
used it in his former job, so it's
Okay.
been very
Good.
helpful.
Number 2, under human resources, I just underlined what we're talking about here, and I'm going to emphasize this in case there's town employees that are listening. Develop a proposal for limiting the town's employee benefit costs. We're not actually looking at reducing or limiting benefits, is that correct?
Just cost, and that's a carryover from,
For any town employees out there, it's cost that we're trying to drive down.
we're looking at plan design.
Got it, okay. I also thought the internship program was great. I had a question, though, from the sub-bullets there. Is this an internship program simply to get high school students to work on website type stuff? Or is this more an internship program along the lines of what the police department is doing, where we're actually providing opportunities for students to actually get involved with town government?
That's more of what it is.
Okay, good.
In fact, I had put this list together before we had the intern from Norfolk County.
Okay.
We would like them to start doing some of the information that we'd like to have done in the office, like any good internship. It
Yeah.
requires a lot of photocopying.
Yeah.
But also attending the meetings and
Okay.
to see actually how
Yeah.
government works.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have them actually do some real useful work. That's great. I just wanted to make sure that if we're gonna do that, I think
Yeah.
they ought to get a chance to see how town government works and, to the extent feasible,
Exactly.
they actually, not participate like a member of a committee, but they actually get to participate in the meetings, okay.
No, absolutely.
And then under professional development, the only comment I had there, you said attend at least one professional development meeting per month. I'm delighted if you can make it to a meeting once a month. My own view around the goal is that it ought to be at least once a quarter that you target that, so that we don't get into a game about, oh, I missed June because I was on vacation for 2 weeks, and then the meeting that they had. So I would just say in terms of a standard, let's make it a quarter,
Perfect.
with the understanding that that's not intended to limit you, it's just intended not to whip you into having to do it every month. Mike, I think I know, under economic development, we have Lot 3 listed there, and I think we've had some very indirect and vague conversations about exploring what we can do to develop Lot 3.
Yes, and we're gonna have a
okay.
meeting. We'll
Okay.
have that on agenda very shortly and talk about that.
That's all I have. Okay, so with Mike's comments and those clarifications and those edits, I'm good with these goals. Maybe you'll take this, redraft it, finalize it, and then we'll
I think we'll
formally
vote on
accept
it
it.
on
Okay.
Tuesday on the 3rd. I'd like to
Yep.
get it up on the website as soon
Okay.
as possible.
Great. That's great. Next, vote to appoint Stephen Resch to the Medfield Board of Health.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that for what term?
This will be a three-year
Three-year
term.
term.
Three-year term.
Should indicate that.
Yeah, just looking at the list, this would be filling the seat. We have our whole list here, right? Filling the seat.
I think I pulled the other two out of this. As resignations, I think
No,
it's
I
just
think-
show Carol.
I think it
yeah.
is.
Just had it up, and I'm trying to see what the, yeah, so this would be the term that expires in 2022. Right?
Yeah.
And then we have a term,
Yeah.
a vacancy for a term that expires in 2020 to
Yes.
fill. So Stephen will take the 2023 term,
Yeah.
and then we're looking for someone to fill the term, the one-year term, with the potential to add a member on top of that if anyone's interested, if we end up with more interested people.
And then, on the annual appointments, you want to go through those, or should we jump to the Medfield? I'm only sensitive to timing in terms of not stretching this out.
Well, we should get all this done, I think.
Okay?
I think we should get all of these.
All right. I think some of these conversations are going to be a little lengthy, but, okay,
I think we gotta get them done.
all right.
You want to do the committees first or the individual appointments? Individual appointments are mostly town employees.
Yeah, individual appointments should be pretty easy, right?
It's mostly town employees.
Yeah, I don't think I had, once again, I'm
I didn't have
frustrated because I
anything on individual
highlighted some
Yeah, I
stuff,
think
but
if
because I
you don't
did
have
it
any
in
issues with
PDF.
any of them, if we could, you can vote them as one group.
I don't believe I had anything, I did the same thing with the PDF and I highlighted all my comments and then they didn't print out. No, they're on the screen, but they don't print
Oh,
out,
really?
so, yeah, so all the stuff that I highlighted that I wanted to ask questions about, it was wasting my time. I don't think there was anything here in the individuals. Yeah, there was nothing in the individuals that I was concerned
So I would
about.
move that we appoint all of the people on the individual appointments list then.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye, okay, that's done. Now the committees.
Can we start with Exhibit B,
If
committees?
you want to.
That's the shorter
Do we have an
of
extra
that.
copy of the,
You know what,
I didn't print it out?
if you want.
I just
take-
have my
That's all right, you can have mine.
issues, but I don't have
Pete,
the
if you
actual
want-
list.
If you want, there, use mine, because
Okay.
my,
Yeah, I thought we put one in there for you.
Oh, it's right in front of me. How about that? I hadn't looked through my packet. Thank you. Thank you, Gus.
no problem. So Exhibit B. We'll do these one at a time. I think most of these are,
Yeah, we have two people to appoint to the Affordable Housing Trust
Yeah.
Board.
We didn't even have a chance to put the resignation that Tim just sent.
so we don't have people to do it. We're just, so we're,
have
are
two
we?
people who are interested, right?
Ah,
We have two interested people for the Affordable Housing Trust Board. Tim Bonfati's resigned, and then we had one vacancy from Jack Wolf, and so
Yeah.
Brett Hayman and Kerry McCormick are interested in the appointment. I think, Kristen, you've talked to both of them.
I have.
I know Brett, I work with Brett. He volunteered for this without any urging from me. He's an attorney whose practice is on tax credits, including low-income housing tax credits and historic tax credits and all that kind of stuff. And then Kerry, I think you both know Kerry. He was on one of the hospital committees back in the day. And so I don't have a preference between who fills the 1 year left on Tim's term and then who gets the 2-year term for Jack Wolf. And then for reappointments, I think the reappointments are Ann Thompson and myself. And I'm happy to continue in the selectman seat on that board for 2 more years.
and Ann, I assume, is also,
Ann would like to be reappointed.
Okay.
And if she's watching at home, I did not forget, Ann, that you want to be reappointed, and we are hopefully going to reappoint you. If not, she'll be right down here.
comments?
That's fine with me.
Okay, Based on your recommendations, Mike, on this one in particular, I'm happy to support that, so
Okay.
all those in favor of,
So it's a
or motion to appoint,
Yeah, so moved.
second.
all those in favor?
Yep.
All right. So that'll be, so who,
Brett is,
let's give Brett the 1 year term for
Okay.
Bonfati. So
Okay.
Brett will be a term expiring in 2020.
Yep.
And Kerry McCormick will be a term expiring in 2021.
21.
Just because I think Brett is younger, he can have the shorter term.
Okay.
And then my term will be 2021, Ann's is 2021.
Yep.
And everybody else is still 2020.
okay.
All right. Looks like we have nobody in the ZBA.
Yay, we're,
Just your associate members you need to reappoint.
Oh, okay.
those are all 1 year,
Those are just
and
associates.
do we know they all want to be
They all wanna
reappointed?
be-
Motion,
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
That's reappointing Spinelli, Peck, and Gustafson.
And those are just for 1 year, so they
Okay.
just go 2020, 2020, 2020. Americans with Disability Compliance Review Committee, Ann Thompson.
She would like to be reappointed.
So moved.
And that's for a term through 2022.
Yes.
I second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Yep. So on this committee, I would suggest that we try to find someone who has an experience with a family member or somehow is tied into the disability community. There's certainly a lot of people in town that I think I've suggested names in the past.
Mhm.
So I think it would be good if we could reach out to somebody and see if someone's interested in,
So would this be, the idea would be expand the size of the committee, is what you're saying?
yeah,
Or-
yeah, I would keep
Yeah.
Mo Goulet and Christine
Mhm.
Truweiler on it and
Yep.
Ann Thompson and just add.
Yeah,
Another
and the
person
committee
or
also
two.
has not been active for many, many years.
Mhm.
And it's something that we really need to get, back on track this year.
Do we have issues, like
Yes.
getting it back on track
Yes.
because we actually have issues?
We have some issues coming up.
Okay. Board of Health, we just talked about Steve Resch,
Steve on there?
and that was through 2023, 2022.
2022 for Steve.
And Carol Reed has been speaking to people to see if there is interest in the Board of Health. I've checked with some people as well, and so that there may be some more people that express some interest.
I had a meeting with somebody this week who's expressed some interest and just wanted a few days to think about it to let me know whether or not they're interested, so
Okay.
hopefully we'll
Good.
find out soon.
Okay, yep. So that one is not yet fully staffed. We still kind of have an issue there. But
Did
No,
we
although with
vote
two-
Steve?
With
Yeah,
two
we voted
members, they would
Steve in.
have a
Okay.
quorum and they can call a meeting, which is very
Right.
helpful given what's
Right.
going on in town.
Right. Board of Registrars,
They're fine.
they're
nothing
all
to-
fine. So that's okay. Board of Water and Sewerage,
I'd move
Christian
to
Carpenter.
reappoint
Carpenter.
Christine.
And he would like to continue as well.
Okay.
I'd move to reappoint him.
Second,
all those in favor?
Aye. before he
That's
can
it.
change his mind.
Okay, that's taken care of.
Conservation is just Bob Agler and Mary McCarthy, and they've indicated they would also like to be reappointed.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
So
Okay,
that's going through 2022.
2022.
22. Enterprise Fund Committee, that's everybody. Is everybody okay being on it?
Everybody
that's
would
on
like
it?
to continue.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. That's just 1 year, 2020.
Mhm.
Historic District Commission, Michael Taylor, John Malona,
Still interested in,
still interested?
So moved to appoint.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and that's for, again, 2022. Permanent Planning and Building Committee, Tim and Christine.
I think that's
these
a
are actually
three-year
three-year
term.
terms,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
Shouldn't
three-year
say
term.
one, it should say 3 years.
So it's just Tim, and he does want to be reappointed to that.
He wants to be
okay.
reappointed to this committee, so he'd be 2022 on this, and I would be, I'm just a 1 year since I'm an ex officio, so I would be a 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Okay,
So we don't lose
Well, that
Tim's
was-
services entirely.
okay, that part was painless.
He's just been critical to our capital building projects.
And he said he regretted resigning from the Affordable Housing Trust, but his business, they have something like five school building projects going on right now, and he does all the night meetings, so it's just hard for
Yeah,
him to
yeah.
get to stuff.
Okay.
The building committee meets first thing in the morning.
Okay.
We like to meet before 7.
All right, let's start with A, Bay Colony Rail Trail Advisory Committee, all 1-year terms.
All 1 year,
They all want to be reappointed?
yes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
They probably should be renamed the Medfield Rail Trail Committee or
I
something.
think this is the
So this-
renaming.
This is the rename. They were the
Study committee.
study committee.
Yeah.
And then Christian when we met with them last year, asked to be changed to the advisory committee.
But still Bay Colony, because they're calling themselves, they're branding themselves as Medfield Rail Trail, I think, so, but whatever.
I'll reach out to him and ask him.
yeah, we can entertain a change in the name if they want. I kind of agree with you, Pete. It's not, it actually makes it confusing between the Bay Colony Rail Trail and the Bay Colony Trail, so. I
The
agree
Bay
with
Circuit
you.
Trail, you mean?
Huh?
You mean the Bay Circuit Trail?
Yeah, Bay Circuit Trail, yeah.
Needham is actually expanding their section of the trail, I think, I saw.
They build-
Originally, it was a Bay Colony Railroad that ran on
Right.
the
Yeah.
line, that's where it came from.
Okay. So is Needham building bigger blockades, or is it just the?
No, they're expanding the section that they're, I don't remember exactly how it works. Newton's already built their section,
Yeah.
so all we need is a bridge over 128. We had a bridge, but they widened 128 and the bridge disappeared.
But those big wooden things have to come down. Those are designed to stop trains.
So my suggestion at that point was that they give us the bridge and we would put it over the Charles River between Dover by the Walker School, because we need a bridge there. But I think Dover wants the bridge.
All right, Capital Budget Committee.
Everybody would like to be reappointed.
Everybody wants to be?
So moved.
Nobody asked me, but second.
Tim Sullivan filled out the paperwork and he spoke for you.
Oh, he said I would like to be reappointed.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Not that you're being taken for granted, Mike.
Right,
but
right.
Just all feel we know you so well.
That's right.
All right, Cemetery
They would like
Commissioners,
to be reappointed.
all of them, Tom Sweeney, David Temple, and Paul Hogan.
So
There are
moved.
the two associates are 1 year
Or
terms?
1 year, so they'll be 2020 and Tom will be 2022.
Okay,
So moved.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 2022.
Collective bargaining committee, nobody wants to be reappointed, but we don't have a choice. I didn't even ask anybody.
Move to appoint the collective bargaining committee ad infinitum.
What did I do with those other ones?
I'm not seconding that. Someone else is gonna have to second that one.
Oh, I'll second it. All those in favor?
Yep.
No.
By a 2
Just
to 1.
kidding.
By I thought that was just posturing.
Right, no, it's not like the whitewash fence. It's not, yeah.
All right, okay. 2020, that's good. Committee to Study Memorials, again, 1 year terms.
Correct.
Everyone wants to be reappointed?
Wants to be reappointed.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Okay. Council on Aging, Katie Robinson, Gwyneth Centauri, and Perry Constas.
So
They are 3-year terms.
3 year terms.
I had a question about this one.
Sure.
And I should have just looked up what it was. I mean, I had thought, I always thought there were 5 members on this board. And then what I'm trying to understand is why there's 3, 2, and then 1, as opposed to 2, 2, and 1, or 2, 2, and 2 if it's 6.
Michael Clancy resigned.
Ah,
There's
there
only
you
5.
go. Okay,
Yep.
that's what I thought. So
Yep.
one of these folks is gonna fill Clancy's
Yep.
seat. That's what didn't quite track for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So why don't we make, I believe it was Katie Robinson who replaced him, so why don't we
Okay.
make her 2021?
so she'll fill the term expiring, that makes sense.
Yep.
2021. And the other 2 would be 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye, okay. Mike, I have to say, I admire that you picked up on something like that. That's great. Elderly Taxation Aid Committee, 1 year terms. Everybody wants to do it
Everybody
again?
wants to be reappointed.
So moved.
ETAC, second.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye, okay.
Emergency Management Agency. So this is a new committee. Well, it's not a new committee, it's a new membership.
Mhm.
So you named Chief Carrico as the Emergency Management Director.
Mhm.
And he asked that these are actually the people he would like to have named for the committee.
Mhm.
He does need a Board of Health member, which I figured I'd wait until we have a full
Mhm.
compilation of Board of Health before we name that. And then
Mhm.
he'll be looking, once we get the committee up and running, and the department up and running, he'll be looking for 2 citizens at large to serve on the committee. So once he starts meeting and gets everything in place, we'll send out an announcement looking for 2 members for that.
So the one reaction I had to this one is there any need to have someone from IT on this?
Probably not a bad idea.
Hmm.
We can add Owen to the committee.
So we'll hold action on that one, I guess. Do we have to appoint the ones that have been identified? It's
Yes.
new, so we're appointing the first 6 names on the list with an understanding that we have more to do.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I would move the appointment of the first 6 on the list.
Aye, second?
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. And plus Owen, you want to appoint Owen. as well.
I'd like to appoint Owen. He's
Okay, that's a good idea.
not a citizen at large where he's staff, we can just appoint for him.
Part of his job duties.
Okay. So did we just do that, or we,
Yes.
okay, we
You're
just did
appointing
that
Owen as
also?
well.
Owen?
Yep.
Yep.
So Owen, 22. one. Slots. Great. Next one is Employees Insurance Advisory Committee, all one-year appointments.
Correct. There is a new addition to this committee, and that is Kathy Vandenbloom, who works for the school department. I have just reached an agreement within the last few weeks with Dr. Marsden to make Kathy the joint HR director for schools and town.
Oh,
So
okay.
she'll be doing that, so I'd like to add her to this committee.
Is this all one-year terms?
Yes.
One-year term, okay.
I would vote to move all of these people.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done. Historic Commission, lots of people.
Anselin is gone,
Yep.
gone off to Medway.
She's off.
So who do we know that wants to be reappointed here?
The three listed for 2019,
Okay,
and all of the associates
and
need
all
to be
the
reappointed.
associates, and with it saying still 2018, does that mean we
Yeah,
didn't?
I just didn't update it.
We just
That-
didn't
they
do it,
should
so
be
they'll all be going up.
all be 1 years.
The 2019s will be 2022,
2020s.
and the associates will all be 2020.
I would move all those people.
Second. Historic Commission.
Historic or Historical Commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Historic district.
Right. It's in here.
We already did that one, right?
I think, yeah, historic district's on a different,
We did that already.
yeah, I think they're on a different one.
Did it already.
Yeah, historic district's on they're on Exhibit B.
Kingsbury Pond Committee,
They would all like to be reappointed.
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Yep.
Aye, okay. You're on for another year. Wildlife Study Committee,
I just saw them this evening, they'd all like to be reappointed.
I thought that Nate Bazinet was on that now, not? Is he not?
well,
They don't want
I think we had suggested to him,
Yeah.
given his
Yeah.
interests, he might want to talk about it, but I don't know that it's
yeah, I
ever
don't
actually
think we did
happened.
anything,
I
right.
don't know if it happened, but actually, I know Mark was talking to Nate. Now that Nate is on the Board of Registrars, Nate needs to resign from the other committees.
He can't be on any other town committees by
Oh.
reason.
Oh, never
Currently, I
mind
know
then.
he is on the safety committee, and I'll have a conversation with
Right.
him that he'll need to
Okay.
enter a formal resignation for that.
Okay, I would move the reappointment of these four then.
Okay.
Actually,
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
all
actually, you don't need
good.
to reappoint
You
them,
don't
they're all
need to, they're all there.
2021. You made
Yeah,
them 3
you're
years
right.
last
They're
year.
there.
All right.
You're right. Medfield Animals, I should act, okay. Animal Control Study Committee. John, any comments?
John?
Your Medfield Animal Control Study Committee?
Just 'cause
I
you were
left you
here.
in there because you're not done yet.
We're not done yet. I think we still should keep that.
There's still animals to control.
Yes.
1,722 animals.
Okay.
I'd vote to reappoint the committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Medfield Cultural Council,
It's just your 2019s, yep.
yeah, and just as an observation, I was surprised when I said, I was looking for Jane Minio's name, and she's not on this.
She's not on this. She comes
Okay.
off occasionally, and now she's working with her other organization. She
Okay.
stays off of this.
Okay, okay.
And this is another one with an odd staggering of the board.
Yeah,
Before we leave the,
nobody at one point, and then we just,
before we leave the animals, Rosemary O'Brien has moved out of town.
we'll take her off.
Okay. So you're down to 6, so you better not have any contentious votes that go 3 to 3 and you're deadlocked. Kinda, all right, okay. Okay. So we have 5 names: Medfield Cultural Council. There's no problem with the staggering, I guess, huh? For something like that. We don't care. So it's 3-year term, they're all 2022. Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Yep.
Aye, okay. Medfield Energy Committee, 2 Leolinsky, Penny Connor, and Christine, and you people both as ex officios. Is
I'm
the
gonna
ex
take Marie
officio and
Nolan
you,
off.
is that 1 year or 2 or 3?
1 year for the ex officio, so that should be 1.
We need to take Marie Nolan off as
Marie's
well.
off.
Right.
So we have at least 1 vacancy, right, Pete?
You know, Marie Nolan comes to all the meetings.
Oh, she does?
She does.
Oh,
It's up to you if you want to keep
let's keep her.
I'd keep her.
I was assuming she was now. She's still coming. Keep her.
She's been very valuable. She started it.
Well, until she decides she doesn't want to do it, I would roll with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have two people, Lee and Penny, to be reappointed for 3 years, and two people, Christine and Pete, to be appointed for 1 year. I don't know, you probably can't do it, you probably have to move it.
I move that the appointments be made as stated.
Okay, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So this is 2020.
No disrespect intended, but we were here for the 7 o'clock one, so we're leaving now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, John. Our best jokes come in toward the end of the meeting, though, so you might want.
No, I'm sorry.
They should be thanking John. We have to be here either way. We have to do something else.
Medfield Youth Outreach Advisory Board, this is one I don't think we're ready to, I think we need to talk about this board. I have a view, given that for several years, the board basically operated without actually closing the loop with us on anything, and given the fact there's actually only one member of the Youth Outreach Department right now, and maybe ultimately two, it doesn't make sense to me to appoint a board at this level for Medfield Youth Outreach. I can see it might make sense for us to appoint a board at the point that we've reconfigured Medfield Youth Outreach to, we've talked about something like Medfield Family, Youth and Family Services, where we actually have an agency that's dealing with the full spectrum of social needs in the town. I can see a board that would be configured to oversee that. This is not to say I don't think this board should exist. It's that I think this is basically an advisory board that should continue to do what it feels like it needs to do in support of youth outreach, but it does not need the formal designation of a committee. Because for one thing, they've operated without actually coordinating their activities for a couple of years. And the other is, I think this is an area that we actually need to rethink what that department is actually all about, and then put a board in place to help that department
So I don't
do
think,
its modified.
I don't think that's quite right to say that they've operated without coordinating. I think the first thing is that they've been in existence a very short amount of time. It's probably only a year or two at most.
I think it was 2016.
It was 2016.
Yeah, when we looked at, when they were in and we looked at the charter and the original appointment, it was 2016.
You know, the original appointments were 2016, and then the board expanded itself and didn't do anything. I don't want to sound overly critical. My point is, we have one person in that department and a board. And I'm saying, and I think it's an area that actually the town needs to take a fresh look at, what the scope of that department's all about. So if you're going to appoint a board to support a department that needs to be looked at in terms of its scope of responsibilities, I don't know how it's hard to appoint a board and know you've got the right people on it if you haven't done that. So I just don't think we're ready to move ahead with this as a board, because I'm not convinced we need it under the current configuration.
Well, and as part of that discussion, I mean, part of the issue has always been that they were under the Board of Health, and the Board of Health seemed to have no interest in them. And so that they were trying to create this board to get a group of people together that did have an interest in what their mission was, and that was successful. But I think it's always helpful to have a discussion about how it fits in, so.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the people who are doing that have an interest in supporting this, I'm not saying they should all go away. I'm just saying I don't think this one is at the level of a board that the selectmen need to appoint, because I think we need to get better focus in here. What they're doing here, there's a lot of departments that have committees or boards that are not, we don't appoint FOSI, we don't appoint the Friends of the Public Library, and yet they play a very important role. So I'm not trying to suggest that they don't have an important role to play. I'm just saying I don't think we need to be in the middle of it.
Right, and we had talked about it when that came up, about the reconfiguration,
Right.
kind of the reporting line and taking it out from underneath the Board of Health. And so I think to that point, we have to decide exactly what this board's going to be doing. Because to Gus's point, if what they're doing doesn't require town appointment, it may be better for them even not to be a town-appointed committee that's then subject to the strictures of the open meeting law and all minutes and all the things they have to do. If what they're really doing is kind of acting as a sounding board and then doing kind of cheerleading and support for that department. They're probably freer to do that if they aren't an official town of Medfield committee.
Well, and it probably makes sense to address that whole issue of whether or not it makes sense to have them and their budget under the Board of Health or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
You already voted to take them out from underneath the Board of Health.
right.
Okay, so where are they now? They're just a separate entity?
They're under me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to force an absolute decision tonight. I'm just saying I don't think tonight's the night for us to reappoint a board that we're not sure we really then need. So I view this as a continuing discussion. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
okay,
force
all
a
right.
decision.
Chris, what success are we having finding another youth outreach worker?
We have not advertised the job. We last, when we met with the advisory board, were trying to decide whether or not the selectmen wanted to continue with 2 youth outreach employees who are providing clinical counseling. So I don't think there's been a decision from the board that that's an indication you want to continue to do that.
Right.
Or you do. I just don't think a decision was made finalizing that. I don't want to advertise a position until I know exactly what the scope of that position is.
Oh.
They do also need to see the personnel board, which, due to some personal issues, has not met this summer. But I need to meet with them to talk about regrading the position, which I don't anticipate to be an issue. It fits into the current system, but we need to determine what the scope of work is for that person.
Yeah, and then once we do that with the personnel board, we should figure out how to have this discussion
Right.
that you want to have, Gus.
Yeah, I think as I see it, there's 2 issues. There's the one around the scope of services we're providing. I'm still not satisfied with the clinical services being something that we should be in the middle of. But that's one thing. But then the other piece is, because the youth outreach defines itself as 18 and younger, when I think of what some of the social issues are and the challenges that people here in town have faced, there's a lot of people here in town that are facing issues, and they're not 18 or younger, or they don't have kids in the school system. So it's not like I'm trying to squeeze this out of existence. I'm actually asking the question, do we really have a department that's focused on the full spectrum of the social needs in the town, or have we kind of historically focused on one segment, and that's the only reason we're there? And I think a relook at that it's timely for us to do that in light of some of the events over the past couple of years.
Well, all right, but I think that we should try to do that in a timely manner so that we shouldn't let it drag on, because it makes sense. If we decide that we do want to continue with youth outreach, that we should try to get back to the full staffing as soon as possible.
Right. Memorial Day Committee. I guess I can't vote on this one.
I move the reappointment of the members of the Memorial Day Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
I thought that was everybody who listed.
About me, now it's police chief, Michelle.
Oh, yes, I need to replace the police chief. And obviously, Bill Mann can no longer serve on the committee as well.
Right.
Bob
I
doesn't
thought he
want to
still
be on it?
wanted to be on it. No?
We'll have to check, but
Well, a point for now, we'll double check with Ron Griffin and see if he still
We got some
wants to be
time
on.
before Memorial
Yeah.
Day.
So
How about-
are
how
we
about,
holding off, then we holding off on official action there, or is it just?
I think we gotta appoint them in it.
I would appoint them, and then we can, if Ron Griffin would like to resign.
Okay.
we can. I'll talk to him.
And
But
how
I
about-
thought he wanted to.
Having been a member last year, I can say it's not a real heavy lift, so.
There's sort of a set program for how
Right,
it works.
right.
Do we want to see if the chief, the fire chief wants to be on this committee?
oh yeah, he's supposed to be.
We'll put both, we'll have both fire chiefs on the committee, fire chief and police chief.
Given that we are well away from Memorial Day, let me just suggest we put that one as a hold, and we deal with this when we actually know who's on it. So we'll kind of ignore that vote that we just took and decide we'll do a redo on this one when we're ready. All right. And if Ron is, okay, all right. OPEB Trust Fund.
I would move the
well,
reappointment.
Except we have one that we have to take off, who,
Oh, I thought I replaced all of those. I tried to replace all of Michael's with myself, so.
so I assume that would be it. Okay, so Christine replaces Mike. And again, I think I can't vote, so
You can vote for yourself.
I can vote for myself. Okay, so Pete had a motion.
Yes, so moved.
All right, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye, okay. just as an aside related to that, I have to set up a meeting sometime soon for us to look at the performance through the end of June, so we can report back to the two of you on the performance of the trust fund as of June 30th. Open Space and Recreation Committee,
Reappointed, they're still working on the open space plan and should be finishing it shortly.
I had a question about Eric O'Brien, where he doesn't live in town. Did we decide that he could serve because he
You had, yeah. you
had
him on it last
connections?
time.
He no longer works in town?
We don't have a prohibition in the bylaw or anything.
Okay, all right. I would move the reappointment of all.
Appointed Marie Nolan to the
Yeah.
Energy Committee, so.
Second.
let me just to dwell on that for a minute. When we did this with ALS, we basically, I think, made the non-resident a non-voting member. Now, that one was because we had a lot of extra people on. Is there any legal restriction on a member of a committee being a voting member if they're not a resident? Is there?
No,
No.
not unless you've got
Okay.
something in the bylaw, which you do not have, so
Okay.
it was strictly practice and policy.
It was an unwritten policy
Okay,
that the selectmen had that
Okay.
you did not want to have out-of-town members on boards, but we have
Uh,
changed that over the last few
yeah,
years.
if they were boards or committees that really had a big
This is
hand in.
appointed versus elected or
Yeah.
anything with any responsibility.
Yeah, if there were fiscal issues that were tied in, I see how that makes sense, but if we have people
Right.
from out of town that are willing to help our town be better, then that's great. Okay, so, open space, did you make the motion already?
I did. I think we
I
voted.
second.
Second, did we already vote?
Aye.
Did we vote? I don't remember calling that one, but, okay.
Aye, again.
Safety Committee, looks like,
The only one that would need to be reappointed would be Michelle.
okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Okay, that's 2022. And you said that Nate will have to step down from that, though.
Correct. And then last year, we changed the state hospital building grounds to 3-year terms, but we do need to appoint Michelle to that,
To a 3-year term.
to a 3-year term. She was replacing Bob Meany's
So moved.
deputy Wilhelmi.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And you said that was, I was doing one thing and I wasn't listening. So her term is what? 1 year?
3
2
years.
3
3
years,
years.
3 years, okay.
This is going on for another 3 years?
You're still here? You weren't supposed to hear that part.
So there's a length of term column here that doesn't seem to be right
It says
then.
in perpetuity, actually.
They're 3. We changed it last year
Yeah,
to
they're all
3-year
3-year
terms. I just
terms.
didn't have to update it, but we changed them to 3.
Except for John, it's just, it's 13 for John. You leave the 1 and just add the 3 to the right of it. It's kind of.
Geez, here's that John Thompson guy on another committee.
All right, State Hospital Environmental Review Committee, they are all, that's a 1-year term?
Yes, we reappoint them every year until we finish all of the projects and closures at the Medfield State Hospital. We will keep them in existence.
So John, you're better off with the 3-year term than what these folks are gonna have by the time that.
Well, he's one of them, too.
the direct- Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, John.
So moved.
Good point. All those in favor, or second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Okay. The State Hospital Master Planning Committee,
So last
do
year.
we need it?
Last year, you decided that you wanted to keep them in existence until we went to and had our special town meeting.
Right. And I'm asking this as just a sincere question, it's not a loaded question at all. What I'm looking at, what I'm thinking of is the Development Committee got help from Pat Casey. I'm thinking that the committee itself probably hasn't met because the committee doesn't actually have a chart, a purpose as a committee. Pat has been greatly helpful. My guess is that many of, these folks would be happy to help in the education effort leading up to the zoning change and probably even the disposition vote in the spring. So it's not an issue of whether they won't be helpful or they wouldn't be helpful. It's just, my only question is, do we actually need the formal committee if the committee's not voting? I'm happy to take their view on this too. It just seems to me it's not really a necessary committee, because whatever work they're doing within the scope of what the Development Committee is doing, so.
So I continue to get emails from that committee.
What are they doing?
They're passing along suggestions about different things.
They're just providing updates to where information is
I mean-
regarding the state hospital.
So you all think it's a good idea to keep them as a
I
committee?
think
I
it
don't
makes
care.
sense to keep them until we go to the special
Yeah,
town
when
meeting.
I had an exchange with them about this issue within the last year,
Mhm.
and the consensus that came back as reported, I think by either by Brandy or Lucille or somebody, was that if what was going to be proposed to the special town meeting was going to be consistent with their master plan,
Mhm.
then they would want to remain in existence to
Okay,
engage in their outreach, communication, and all that.
okay. Yeah, I mean.
I don't know if they've been meeting or not.
I don't think they've been
Well,
formally
committee,
meeting.
but, I mean, I think,
So far, I think our path is consistent with the master plan, so I don't have my question was an administrative question of having a committee that doesn't operate as a committee, not a comment on the value of the people on the committee in helping this process. It's just that the people that I'm aware of that have been involved have helped it by meeting with the development committee. So I don't have a problem with keeping it, it's just,
I would suggest we keep it.
Okay. all right.
There's only
So
down to
moved.
5 people anyway.
Yeah,
Second.
it's not, okay.
How many did we initially appoint? 9?
Well, there was the main committee, and then there was the support, the support committee, so there were actually more than that even, I don't.
Oh, yeah,
John,
yeah.
But
I
the official
I never, I
research,
don't
there were
remember
about-
how many, there were
There
a
were
lot.
probably about 5 resource members.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Wait, looking for a second there, Mike?
I second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye, okay. Next, the State Hospital Mediation Committee.
Needs to remain.
So moved.
Yeah,
Second.
and they're all willing to serve still, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye. Okay. State Hospital Negotiating Committee, so
They've
even
all
when
done
I
the-
looked at this, I lost, so there's a State Hospital Negotiating Committee and there's a State Hospital Mediation Committee. Do we need both of those committees?
We do. So
You
the
do.
State Hospital Mediation Committee worked on the environmental issues at the state hospital, and which then went into the negotiating for the LDA for the sale. So you
Right.
still need both of them, because we haven't finished the environmental issues with the laundry parcel.
So how do they relate to the State Hospital Environmental Review Committee?
So the review committee reviewed the reports for the hospital that are done by the
Mhm.
state, and we had an outside, the town had an outside consultant, Andrea Stiller was an LSP that reviewed the
Mm-hmm.
environmental reports. This committee, as Christine said, was focused on the land disposition agreement. It
Mhm.
included Steve Nolan and Bill, and I
Yep.
think Christine, you were on, I wasn't on the.
John was on that, and I was, and Ken Richards.
Right.
Yeah, it was a different committee, it was really around the LDA, because.
It was around the purchase.
The purchase of it.
And so forth.
So the point that I'm making is we have 6 committees having to do with the state hospital. And as long as,
Yeah, it's just
I
different
would like to,
functions.
I'd like to keep them because they're
All right.
different functions.
okay, okay.
Maybe
So
we
the-
should create a state hospital committee coordinating committee.
Ooh,
Oversight
Ooh.
of all the committees.
Yeah, let's hold off till we actually have a project and we need the staff
None of
of the
them have to be
project
to do
manager there.
anything.
Okay, so the State Hospital Negotiating Committee, 1-year term,
Yes.
4 people on it.
move to reappoint them.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. John, did you have any comments on that? You've just been reappointed, just to me. Okay, yeah. We gave John Thompson
have
a
a
chance
meeting,
to
John, and
comment on his
decide some
reappointment.
different
I just wanted to show equal deference.
Pardon? Yeah, so we don't have a chair now, so you and I'll have to
He
figure out who's
resigned
gonna be the
Yeah,
chair.
he resigned from the committee.
State Hospital Development Committee, everybody's willing to keep going. The only issue, as you saw in their report, was,
No,
huh?
we have a resignation from
Oh,
Adam
Adam
today.
resigned?
Yeah,
I
I
didn't-
didn't have a chance to put it on the agenda, it just happened this afternoon.
Ah. Was that that was conflict, or, like,
Too busy.
really? Okay. Well, that's news to me. I didn't
I would
realize
move
that.
to reappoint the other 4.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye. Okay. I had one question on this, actually, as I went through this, the one question I had is whether, I don't know whether it's Sarah or whether it be Nick, but Sarah's, up till now, has functioned much like you function on other committees, where you're officially an ex officio member. When I looked at this list, I was wondering whether we should add, up till now, it's been Sarah, so I'm not sure which way we're going
I
there,
think
but,
Sarah, Nick, and I met, and we're gonna put Nick.
okay, so should
as
we,
that to this
then
committee.
we should add Nick as
Sure.
an ex officio member? If I can, we okay
You
with that?
almost made it to the end without getting on one. Almost. Yeah.
Hold on. That's ex officio.
With that change, I would move the list.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye, okay. So that makes it official. You could have technically tried to squirm out from it until that. Okay. Town Bylaws Review Committee.
I have
1
a
year.
question for you, whether or not we still need this committee.
We need a committee, we need a committee of people who actually are willing to really roll up their sleeves and get into this.
So I would move that we reappoint the committee and ask them to actually roll up their sleeves and get into it.
I will finesse that and talk to them.
I mean, really, the focus should be on the charter, for starters.
The initial request was that they look at the Medfield State Hospital development and try to figure out what bylaw changes we would need as a result of that, and that never happened. So
It's
that-
kind of the
Well,
tail
your
wagging the
convocation,
dog.
Which is great.
As it so happens, by default, we picked up a lot of the bylaws in the last few years because we were under pressure from outside sources. So we've actually probably put half a dozen bylaws on the books, notwithstanding this committee, that were really needed. There are still other bylaws that are needed. I think that there's also a very thorough charter review needed. That's been the case for years.
Mark, is there a statutory requirement that drives that, or are you just saying, well, this stuff hasn't been looked at in a long time, and we should dust it off and make sure it's relevant? Are we working against any legal requirements?
I don't know offhand if there's a requirement for reviewing the charter itself periodically, but there's been a lot of time passed, a lot of things have changed. And when you're looking at management and all that sort of thing, the charter, to be very blunt, wasn't a great document to begin with. The government function notwithstanding the charter. But I think there's some fundamental structural issues, at least, and policy issues that need to be addressed, so that people should at least have that discussion.
Can I mention one pertinent to the hospital? There were some pictures on social media that were taken by a drone, and the drone was within 30 feet of the water tower. If the water tower gets scratched and cuts into the paint, you could get a corrosion point. And so I questioned that person about it, and he said that the FAA defers regulation on flight proximity to infrastructure like that to the local municipality.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
I didn't think that was true either. I thought
That's
it was
true.
500 feet. That's what it is in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what he said back to me.
As a
So
matter of
just throw
fact,
that out
there's
there.
a whole lot of areas of law that they have just totally preempted from local authority, so. But from a structural standpoint, I think the tendency is towards, frankly, centralization and professionalization. And so rather than have a number of committees and boards with employees and personnel issues, is to centralize it in. Frankly, the tendency is to have that authority in a town professional such as the town administrator as a management type of thing, and then that person answerable to the Board of Selectmen, but the administrator having much more authority than, frankly, either Mike or now Chris has under the charter. Mike had a whole lot because it was by default, nobody else frankly wanted to deal with it, but, you know, it was just because that was the way the practice had been, but it ought to be formalized in a way that makes sense. And those are policy decisions. I can point out to you what the deficiencies are. It's not up to me to make the decisions.
My reaction to all this is, and this is not a comment on the people that are on the committee right now, because I don't know their
I don't know who's
skills.
on it, frankly, so.
Well, there's
Cynthia Green, Russ Howells, Neil O'Connor, and Jack McNicholas.
My point is, it seems like this is the kind of a review that would take somebody who has some pretty in-depth understanding of operations of the town, current bylaws. It's not simply a public committee to see what people would like to change. It seems to me the last time we had momentum here, it transformed itself into a systems job of getting making the bylaws accessible, which is fine, but that's not, I guess what I'm looking for is a strategic perspective on how do we want to operate as a town, and that's just, you need certain kinds of people to do that. If the hospital is part of it, then it seems to me Bill Massaro is somebody that should be on this, because Bill is the one who actually did a lot of the legwork, taking a look at bylaws for other places where you had large developments, and he has a whole set of bylaws.
We tried to put Bill on this committee.
He wouldn't do it?
He does not want to, yeah.
Bill's the one that suggested the need for this committee,
know, yeah,
but,
yeah.
but yeah,
I mean, I'll
Doesn't
settle for him just
do
saying I'm not
committees.
on the
I
committee,
mean,
but I'll show up for all
frankly,
the
I
meetings,
I think that's
and I'll
what you'll
share my
get, but he
wisdom.
does not
I'm
want
okay with that.
I view it as being at a much higher level
Yeah.
in terms of the government
Right,
structure itself.
right.
The state hospital's down here somewhere. You can address it, there's bylaws in place that can be tweaked or improved in terms of regulation, once you decide what you want to do with the state hospital, but there's still how the town of Medfield governmentally is going to function
Right.
going forward.
Yeah, if you're talking about charter revisions,
Right.
I would think we'd want to be thoughtful about, A, the task, and B, who we're tapping to try to do that.
Right.
so I guess I tend to agree with Mark's suggestion that we need somebody from the townhouse on this committee, and Mark clearly seems to need to be on this committee.
Maybe
He
either
knows it
current
well.
or past select people.
Mhm.
But,
So can I suggest we just defer on this one until
Right.
we've kind of thought this
This
one
did
through?
bring to mind, though, one thing that I forgot to add on the goals
Yep,
for the policies and procedures for the
Mhm.
development next year. I know we had talked about this, and I don't think we need it. It's something that could go into a bylaw eventually, but I think one procedure to work on next year is sort of a procedure around the hiring of department heads.
Hiring what?
Around hiring of department heads. Because we kind of went in last year when we were replacing the town administrator, the police chief, and all that stuff, without any real guidance as to how it was done. I think we all learned a lot in that process. And so I think it would be helpful to have, when we're not faced with any actual department heads to replace, coming up with, a guidance. And some towns have it in their bylaws. Here's how you replace the town administrator, here's how you hire a police chief. I don't know that we need to do that. But I think there are things that we didn't think about that we ought to have thought about in the process last year, that I don't think we should allow the learning that we got by doing that to lapse, and should memorialize it in some place. And not necessarily a rigid procedure, but things to consider in the composition of a search committee. I don't think we fully wrestled with the impact of having town department heads on a search committee where one of the candidates was going to be another town department head where they're sitting with all the time in the operation of the town, right? And we didn't give enough thought to how you deal with, an acting person who's gonna be a candidate for the full-time job. And there's just a lot of things that should have been part of our discussion as we set up the process up front that weren't. And I think rather than hoping that whenever the next time this happens, we'll remember it, we should have some procedure
Yeah,
saying,
that's a great
you
idea.
can do it this way or that way. And there's other ways to do it,
Yeah.
right? There are some
Yeah.
towns that do it, Newton did this with their fire chief, where they effectively gave their in-house candidate a year kind of trial. And they made their in-house candidate the acting chief for a year, and then decided at the end of the year to make him the chief, right? That's one way to do it. You have committees, you have other ways. So I just think spending some time and putting that on, Christine and Nick can kind of look around what other towns do. Some towns have very elaborate requirements around this. I looked at it when we were replacing the town administrator last year. Some towns have very specific requirements, and I don't know that we need to go that way, but I think if we could this could be a procedure that gets worked on over the course of the year, something we look at next summer, so that we can have it, and really to benefit future selectmen, hopefully 15 or 20 years from now, when we next have to replace a department head. We're not kind of doing what we did last spring, which is sort of saying, okay, we have an opening, and sort of, what do we do? And no one really having much to say about that,
Right.
so.
yeah, I guess, I wouldn't want to see us bureaucratize something, but, so the thing that I think I hear in what you're saying is that somehow or another there's lessons learned that we would like to capture and keep in a format that somebody, as you said, maybe 10 years is the next time that we actually have to do it. It would be good to be able to say, okay, what were the lessons learned? But I would be reluctant to specify that this is how we do it.
Not
or that's how-
specified,
yeah.
but I think having
Yeah.
some menu of options so that in the future, the process is not designed with anyone in particular in mind. And I mean, one of the advantages of having kind of a neutral procedure established in front before you have any sort of opening is that you're not doing it by reference to a specific candidate. And so nobody has a concern that you're structuring the process to favor one candidate or another, or to favor one outcome or another, which obviously I don't think we did. I don't think that was in anyone's mind.
Yeah.
But I think it's, when you don't have some sort of guidance up front and some sort of procedure to follow, you always run the risk of casting doubt on the overall integrity of the process because it's being designed in a specific circumstance, and people can always say, well, it was always gonna have one particular outcome. Again,
Yeah,
I don't think that was true, but I think that I would have, let's put it this way, sitting where I was a year ago or whatever the started, I would have appreciated having some guidance overall and saying, here's some things you can do it this way, you can do it that way, but if you do it this way, here's how you do it.
So my reaction, partly I'll know whether I think that's a good idea when I see what it is that
Exactly.
we actually
Yeah.
produce. So there's a piece of me, I understand what you're saying. In my case, in my first year as a selectman, that was when the fire chief issue came up. And in essence, I guess the fire chief was kind of pretty much underway when I came on board, but nonetheless, I wouldn't have been smart enough to know that there was a procedure involving a search committee to go find a replacement fire chief. I almost accepted that as, okay, I guess I'm learning how the town does it. Over the course of and I was in the DPW head was before I got here. So the 3 decisions that have been made, one of them was before I got here, but I thought it was a good decision, however we got there. The 4 decisions we made. The 3 that we've made since I've been a selectman, the first one, I think I get your point, Mike. It's like, well, the only reason we did it that way from my standpoint, because I didn't have an opinion, was I just got on the roller coaster and went for the ride. And then probably to a good degree, even the police chief was a similar kind of thing, but by the time we got to the 3rd one, that was the first time I basically said, listen, this is the Board of Selectmen, you make a decision on what's in the best business interest of the town. You don't sit there and, it's not the Board of Bureaucrats, but I understand you're not saying that, but
No, not at all.
I like the
Just
idea of the lessons learned, I'm not sure on
From
the
a
procedural.
long-term perspective, one way to look at it and one approach is to charge the department heads with developing a command structure that can be advanced, so that they bring the institutional knowledge along and they have the abilities. And that is dependent on building an organization long-term, understanding that this is how it's probably gonna work out. It's by default that you end up having to go outside your organization because that wasn't done
Well,
previous.
yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with you, Mark. If you create an I mean, I agree with the idea that you should be developing people and you want to have good replacements. On the other hand, if that becomes ingrained, then you can easily get into a locked-in situation.
I'm not
where
saying
everybody's
there has to be some flexibility, but I'm saying that that is certainly an approach. It's becoming more and more difficult. People don't want to go into the public sector. I don't know why. It pays well enough. But across the board, it's difficult to find people. If you have people that have the experience, they have the qualifications, they have the familiarity, it's a good place to start. If you can develop that almost like
Yeah.
a farm team
I
approach.
think we should put something
Yeah,
together
right.
and kind of,
Yeah.
Christine, you and
Put
you
it
can look
together.
over the course of the next year, kind of what other towns have. Because I noted that some of them had some interesting approaches, and so I think we should just think about that, just to add that.
I'll-
Next page, Townwide Master Plan Committee.
Nothing to do there.
It's,
They're all
yeah,
stuck
nothing,
for
actually,
another
they're all
year.
good till 2020.
Yeah.
So that's, they're all set. And the Transfer Station and Recycling Committee, I think we need to put that on hold.
No, we're actually going to leave it at, you're gonna reappoint everybody who's on this list, and then they're going to bring some additional appointments to us at our next meeting.
Yeah, I have well, in light of a communication I've had, I have a problem with doing that.
Okay.
And I'm guessing you all get the same communication. So I saw what was submitted, and that said one thing, and then I heard something different, so I'd like to,
Okay. Well, I will say, I'm assuming you're talking about the communication with Nancy.
yes.
So I had a back and forth with Nancy about
I did too,
Okay.
yeah.
And, I mean, her last email to me was, I'd like to see everybody reappointed.
That's my last email with her.
Then I
too.
want to defer that, and I want to hear from her, because I was out of town, I did not have it, but if somebody sends me a message and says one thing, they owe me a message if they're pulling it back.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to accept that if that's the official statement, because that was the original official statement, but
Yes.
that's not.
Yeah, no, that's where it landed, and I don't, obviously, she didn't copy
Yeah.
either of you on
Yeah.
our back and forth.
Okay, Christine, the only question I have then too is, we've had some discussions around the composition, so what we're saying is if we're all straight here, we reappoint these people and then we add some people that would address the broader needs of the transfer station.
So we're still looking for additional members who have more of a focus maybe in engineering or a focus on the solid waste piece of it, not so much on the recycling. So we'll start
Okay.
recruiting those
Okay.
members as well.
All my comments here in no way are meant to devalue the fundamental value of what we're doing there and the fundamental value of what the people that are putting their time in are trying to do. But we gotta, okay, I got it. So
So
can we
since
just put that
since
on
he's
hold?
currently not paying attention, I suggest we add John Thompson to this committee.
Bill's saying he'll only be a resource member to the bylaw. That was his answer.
We'll do
Tell-
it.
Tell Bill we'll change the name of the committee to whatever he'd like it to be.
Ask him if he's ahead or behind.
Okay. So I think we're done with that for as far as we're gonna take it tonight, yes?
Yes.
All right. Medfield State Hospital zoning and work plan for September 3rd meeting. I had breakfast with Kathy McCabe. Did you, I forwarded the
You did.
proposed agenda.
So can I give you I don't know if you watched our last meeting or not.
I have not.
So, towards the end of our last meeting, Pete had raised, had suggested that at the meeting on the 3rd, that we talk about some changes to the proposed zoning as set forth in the state hospital master plan.
And I saw
And
your
then
comment.
Pete sent an email with the comments, the changes. And my response to Pete, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but my response to Pete was my view is that ship had sailed, and that the judgment that the board had made at the meeting in May was to advance essentially the zoning proposal that was in the master plan. And that sort of the time for adjusting the zoning had passed, and that the meeting on the 3rd was not going to include fundamental changes to the master plan or the master plan's proposed zoning. I will say that the changes that Pete suggests are consistent with the changes I suggested that we make to the master plan and the memo I sent to everybody on May 17th, 2018. But again, from my perspective, it's too late now to change anything, and that, you know, that the meeting we had in May was the meeting to decide what was going to be advanced to the special town meeting. In my own view, significant changes to the zoning would be a significant change to the master plan, and so I don't think we have time to make those kind of changes, and don't think we should spend time on Tuesday talking about changing the zoning. Even though substantively I agree with most of the changes, I would go a little further than Pete, but I just think it's too late to change it. And I think that the changes that Pete suggests, which would allow development over the whole core campus and eliminate the limitations on the areas that are, basically the core of the current master plan is the preservation of the present campus setup and the present footprint of the buildings. And I've thought all along for several years that we shouldn't commit ourselves to that, and we should allow, if there's going to be development, it should be allowed anywhere, and entertain proposals for development anywhere, including on a smaller footprint than what's currently on the campus. But again, that hasn't prevailed. And I do see the changes that Pete suggests as sort of a fundamental alteration of that master plan, which in my view, the board had said we were going to advance to the town meeting in November. And so I thought one way or the other, we had to be clear tonight as to what the scope of the meeting is on Tuesday, because we don't have that much of Kathy McCabe's time. I think based on the agenda you circulated for less than a 2-hour meeting, that's certainly not going to be a long enough meeting to change the zoning. But again, I wanted to make sure we were clear going into Tuesday, kind of what's actually on the table, and that's kind of my articulation of the issue and why I wanted this to be discussed tonight.
Response?
Well, I guess I wasn't aware that the ship had sailed, and so that's why I'm suggesting that we make these changes at this point before it goes to the residents. I think it gives the things that I've suggested are basically to give the town more flexibility, is the way I see it. So that in 50 years, 100 years, if the town decides it wants to do something on the North Field or wherever, that it doesn't have to change the zoning to do that, that it just it can make an arrangement with a developer and do it, so.
Well, and I was sitting in a hotel room in Pittsburgh when your thing came through, and having not memorized the master plan and not having it with me, I read your comments, but then didn't have a way of investigating some of the
Well,
things.
and I spoke to
So-
Kathy McCabe this afternoon,
Yep.
and she says that something about she thinks I was working off of an older version of the
Well, that's what
of
I
the
wondered,
zoning, and
yeah.
so that, because she says that, I was correcting 40R, and she said there was no 40R in the zoning of the
That's-
final master plan.
That's
so-
what I thought. So that one threw me off. The other one was some of the wording you had on some of the spaces that are not currently planned. At one point in time, the Master Planning Committee had talked about designating certain areas as open space, and at those meetings, we pushed back on that, not because we wanted to develop the North Field, but because for the very thing you're bringing up, well, you don't want to preclude it, or you don't want to create hoops, but you don't want to tie the town's hands. The town can do what it wants when the time comes to do it, if it wants to do it. You don't need to lock it in on something. So some of the stuff you were asking for sounded right to me. The 40R caught my attention. It's like, oh gosh, I still
Apparently
don't
that's-
understand
yeah,
40R,
that's-
because
that's
I thought the
apparently not in
40R
there,
had gone
she told
away.
me. Yep.
And then the other place that caught my attention was your wording on the sledding hill. That is one place that I think both the sentiment of the town and also the legal restrictions on the use of the property seemed like you didn't need to change anything there, because we don't have the option of developing the sledding hill. There's restrictions on the use of the land, so.
It's really just, and that was really just the issue of where the community gardens could get located. I mean, you're not gonna put the community gardens in an area where people are gonna sled, obviously, but the actual shape of what is designated on the plan as the sledding hill is pretty big.
Mhm.
And it includes places where you could put a community gardens,
Yeah,
is my point,
yeah.
so.
I'm not
I just
sure
thought the
that's-
town should have that option. Kathy's point when she called me this afternoon was that she wanted to bring more people to the site, the hospital site itself, so that the hospital site would be less a private development for the people that live there than a
Mhm.
town amenity, and that's a good.
But I
argument.
guess, to the point about the community gardens, I don't think there's anything in the master plan that would preclude that as it is, because that's one of the allowed uses of that land is agricultural, so.
Which site?
The sledding, where you're talking about the community gardens down on the sledding hill, or somewhere in that vicinity?
Well, the zoning article that I was looking at said community gardens, and it said no on the sledding hill. So
Oh,
she's
well,
gonna
so-
send me
yeah. So
zoning that I should have been looking at apparently. And
Yeah, some of that stuff, like for something like that, I think we could at least discuss it next week. I don't know that Kathy McCabe would fall on her sword over whether there's a yes or no over community gardens on a
No, look, I mean, I
property.
will say that if there's one thing that we've spent way more time discussing on the hospital relative to its importance is the location of the community gardens. And so, my view is, I mean, I'm thinking back to something that you said, Gus,
Yeah.
which is, when we first got this plan, I mean, you said you were somewhat pleasantly surprised by the coherence and overall articulation of this
Yeah.
sort of comprehensive vision of what the plan is.
Yeah.
And to me, part of that coherence, again, which is, it is what it is, relates to the fact that it's going to retain the campus layout.
Right.
And again, I don't think that's what we ought to lock ourselves into, but part of the coherence comes from locking ourselves into that and not having
Yeah.
the land that's zoned for grass be open to future development that, in the view of a developer who's going, assuming that the town meeting passes this master plan and passes the zoning and indicates its support for the master plan, if that happens, in my mind, then the town meeting has voted, in favor of that particular vision as articulated. And what we're going to then be trying to do to implement that is going out to developers to find developers who are interested in that particular vision. And to my view, if if that's what happens, then, you know, they're not gonna want to be in a position where we're gonna have two areas on either side of this campus where, something in the future could happen that may or may not detract from what it is they put together. And fundamentally, just from a process standpoint, right? I mean, we have a couple of times, and we, not just us individually, but the board as an institution, you know, sort of stepped into the hospital process in sort of an incomplete way that has further delayed us to where we are, to further delay the opportunity for the people of the town to weigh in on this. And so if the response to Pete's suggestions from the development committee or from Kathy or what have you is, look, that's no big deal, it's a minor tinkerage, we can do it, I'm fine with that. And again, I think if that's the case, then it's kind of not that important. But I think any significant change to this, it's way, way too late to do that. And it would just, you know, so that's my concern. If the answer is, look, this is a minor detail, fine, go ahead, fine. But I think we should allot like 10 minutes of the discussion of whether that's a big deal or not. And if the answer is it's a big deal, we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's fine. The example here we're talking about is whether it's a yes or a no on the sledding hill for community
Yeah, but
gardens.
what we're really
I can
talking about
assure you
though are
that
the
we never-
changes to the green where it's all no, where Pete wants to change it to special permit, right? I mean, the main
Yeah,
change
yeah.
is the areas that are zoned for grass where it says no
Yeah.
on here, he would change it to special permit. Now, I would have changed it when I said a year and a half ago to this, I would have changed it to kind of the same thing that the rest of it's zoned for, the same kind of flexible zoning that you have, and allow developers to make a proposal to build where it is cheaper and more efficient to build, rather than insisting that they build where it's most expensive to build. That ship has sailed. I've been outvoted on that. That's fine. But to me, I just don't want to make a change here that's going to upset the apple cart and have either the Hospital Master Planning Committee, the Development Committee think, well, this is a change that fundamentally alters what we're presenting to the town in November, such that it's going to create a much wider range of potential proposals than would be issued in response to the master plan as drafted. And that's my concern, is that we not further kind of move this around so that either, we cannot delay this special town meeting, but either there's some thought, well, we need to do more work on it before the special town meeting, or we have a much less coherent proposal than we have because we have gone in this other direction.
I don't think it should delay things, because you're basically, you've got a written description of what you want in all of these different locations, and that's what's really gonna control, and that's gonna end up in the land disposition agreement that the developer is gonna sign, and that's gonna be the controlling document.
Right, but the zoning is the only relevant regulatory and legal authority for it. So what the developer is going to be bidding on is going to be bidding on the zoning, right? And so within the footprint where there's allowed development, what we hear from Kathy and we hear from the Development Committee and we hear from the Master Planning Committee is within that footprint, there's significant flexibility for proposals, okay? Where there's not flexibility is on the footprint itself. That's where the plan is rigid. And so, which again, I don't agree with, but that's what it is. And so, let's allot some time to this on Tuesday. But I think if this is seen, if I reacted to this as being a more significant change, Pete, than perhaps you intended, and that's why if we want to have some time to discuss this, I just don't want it to turn into a free-for-all on the zoning on Tuesday. And so I think if we limit the discussion of potential changes to the zoning to just the changes that Pete has suggested, and we're not going to entertain other changes to the zoning other than that, I'm fine with that too. I just don't want this to turn into a 5-hour meeting where we're relitigating the master plan, and then we come out of there saying, well, we need to have it, I mean, we have to be done on Tuesday with a plan, and I would hope, with a date for the special town meeting voted on Tuesday. And I think we have to be done and moving in that direction to get that done so that people have an opportunity to really vet this, think about it, and prepare to be there.
So what I think I hear you saying, Mike, is whatever your proposed changes, if any of those changes are either going to blow up the process to reconcile everybody's opinion on them, or they're going to so blow up the master plan concept that suddenly the master plan isn't the master plan anymore. It's just kind of something that it's like horseshoes. As long as you're somewhere close to the stake, it's going to qualify. We don't want to do that. On the other hand, Pete, to your points, if there are Ys or Ns on a use table, that we really never actually know why it was, and you could change it. My own bias is changing it in the direction of greater flexibility without blowing everything up. If there are those and they're inconsequential, then let's get the administration of the zoning change right before we go run forward with it. I agree with that. So we'll allocate some time to talk about that. I'm pretty sure Kathy will be able to tell us which changes are like discretionary, you could do that way or that way, and which ones she'll tell us are gonna mess things up and go from there.
Right.
All right.
But I think we are agreed going into Tuesday that we're finishing this on Tuesday.
I would think it's reasonable to expect that we get through this unless we get some irreconcilable issue that comes up in the discussion.
Well,
And
I don't think there should be.
I don't
To me,
think,
we
yeah,
should
no, I
default back
agree.
to what's in the master plan, right? If there's any irreconcilable issue, I think it gets resolved in favor of what's in the master plan, which is, my view is what the recommendation of the development committee was, to stick with it, and the decision of this board in May was to stick with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm just not forecasting all possible issues that come up. I'm not trying to open up a can of worms here. I'm saying unless there's something comes up that we don't anticipate that would be an important issue, I think your expectation is reasonable that by the end of the meeting, we ought to be able to say, okay, we know what we're doing, we know what we want to do, what's the timeline need to be to get to the special town meeting in the fall? And so I think we can do that. If anybody was going to bring up anything important, I would assume it's the development committee bringing up some issue, and I don't expect they will, because all the feedback we've gotten so far from the developers is that the master plan is workable, so. Okay, anything more on that? Think people are still watching out there? Yeah, okay.
No, the football games are going off for half an hour.
Oh,
Yeah, we're closing on the first.
we're down to 0 watchers
Oh,
then?
well. All right, let's see, license and permits, consent agenda. Friends of Dwight Derby House request a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for reception to be held at the Medfield TV studio on September 13th, 2019, 6 to 8 p.m. Selectmen are invited to attend. You guys are going to have to hold up the fort. I'm out of town again. Neighborhood of 75 Indian Hill Road, Niantic Street request a block party permit for Saturday, September 7th, 2019, 2 to 6 p.m.
I noticed that last proviso that the Friends of the Dwight Derby House so generously included in their request is not repeated in the block parties. I just want to note that.
For good reason, for good reason.
Maybe we should adopt a protocol like the selectmen have
Maybe-
to be invited
maybe
to
we
all
should
these
just
block
try to
parties.
Maybe we should avoid getting ourselves into tough spots. Neighborhood of Emerson Road between Flintlock and Tamarack Road, request a block party permit for Saturday, September 14th, 2019, 4 to 8 p.m. High school cross-country team requests permission to hold a fundraising car wash behind Town Hall on Sunday, September 22nd, 2019. Evelyn, that's good? September 22nd for the cross-country? Medfield Youth Lacrosse requests permission to post signs October 1st through October 6th promoting spring 2020 registration. And William Pope, Director Zulu Gallery, requests a date change for a first Thursday one-day wine and malt beverage permit from September 5th to September 12th, 2019. Don't you think you'd have to change the name for that on that particular month?
My only question about the lacrosse, Evelyn, is it seems like a very short window. I want to make sure that's not a typo. They only wanted 5 days, and it just seems like it's a short window.
I would move the
Basketball's
items,
been up for 2 months. So.
I would move the items on the consent agenda.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
But
and
I would
that's
just suggest,
subject to confirmation of the date. So we've approved the 1st through the 6th,
yep.
and you will have to,
Well, we
Bill?
can, it's
It's
in
in
your,
the-
it's in your folder. Well, if you
in
hand the
the gray
folders down
folder.
here, we'll
Oh.
look at it.
The letter.
just license and permits. Oh, you were thinking that they made a mistake. I thought you meant Youth Lacrosse made a mistake.
I don't know.
It's
Yeah, this says the 16th.
16th.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good, Mike. You're in the top of your game in tonight's meeting. Right?
Because we started at 6 and not 7.
That's okay, so 6, let the record show that the corrected date for that request was the 16th as per the request submitted. We all okay not voting on that again? Okay, thank you. Pending meeting minutes, January 8th and May 28th.
May 28th, you have not gotten from me yet.
Okay, and
Evelyn did them, and I haven't had a chance to go through them as Pete requested, but you should have January 8th.
Okay, and I'm not prepared to,
Okay. So we'll.
January 8th keeps coming up, doesn't it? Haven't we seen that one before?
It was on the last agenda, too.
Maybe I have done it. Well, I'm not ready. I'm not
Do
ready.
you want me to put them on for the 3rd, or do you want me to hold them till the
No, let's,
17th?
I mean,
Yeah.
might as well,
Might as
let's try
well.
to clean them up.
Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully we can have tonight's on for the third too.
Town administrator update.
So I just have a brief update. Hopefully you all received our communication today in some format or form that we have a confirmed death of a horse in Medfield from Triple E. We are working with the Department of Public Health and notifying everyone on that. We have closed all of our park and recreation fields and school activity fields after 7 o'clock, including Medfield State Hospital as well. And we are warning people to go to the DPH website and be informed about what you should do in regards to that. And any updates we get from the Department of Public Health, we'll post to the website, including over the weekend.
And Chris, are we getting any more spraying or not?
So right now, Norfolk County Mosquito Control is scheduled to do the town Friday night, and they'll do their usual truck spaying like they do on a normal basis. The Board of Health and I spoke today, at least Nancy and I spoke, and the Board of Health agent, and we've requested an aerial spraying, and that was denied by the Department of Public Health. They said they would continue to monitor the situation and keep us updated. I know the delegation is concerned because they've heard from some of the constituents in Medfield they would like aerial spraying. We have a significant portion of the town that is open space that will not be reached by the truck spraying. Holliston was also raised to a critical level. Walpole, I believe, was raised to a critical level, and we anticipate Medway will be raised to a critical level at some point today. So that the state may determine to spray this whole area on their own. If they do that, there is no opt-out option. That we will be notified when they do it, but there is no opt-out for them.
When DPH says no spraying, is that a cost? Like, what's the basis for them to deny that when you're critical?
They don't think at this point even though we're critical, we don't qualify for an aerial spraying. I can't tell you what their exact thought is on that,
Okay.
other than they will
Does the aerial
continue to
spraying
monitor
kill
it.
stuff other than mosquitoes? Is that
It's
the
just a
problem?
last resort, even though
Yeah.
they don't think
Yeah.
it
Yeah, I just-
supposedly is very, very directed, specific to mosquitoes, just because of
Mhm.
variables, it's a last resort.
Okay.
Yeah, so if DPH does change their position on that, I will notify you, and we will update that to the area.
Let's see, Board of Selectmen action list, once again, we're
Oh, no.
deferring.
Oh, no.
you weren't
Oh.
here. We did the whole
Man.
thing.
You
We
did
did.
the whole
We went
thing?
through
You
the whole
missed it,
thing.
huh?
Missed it.
On the 3rd,
Watch
you
the
will get an
meeting.
updated list that went from 6 pages down to 2.
Okay, oh.
In
Wow.
lieu of the meeting, Pete and I went and did a bunch of stuff. We fixed the bubbler, we planted some trees. It was a very productive night.
I'm feeling better about being out of town. All
Well, I
right.
said because you weren't here, and this always comes to the end,
Mhm.
and it's like 11 o'clock. And I
Yeah.
said, well, why don't we take advantage of the time when it might be a shorter meeting?
Yep.
Blast through this list, get
That's
some
great.
updates. A lot of the stuff we've
Okay.
done,
Yep.
actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've completed,
Okay,
so.
thank
Some
you.
of them were on there multiple times. and
You
so,
both
like,
are on your game.
we're
This
able
is,
to
this
shut it
is,
down.
It was very impressive how we moved through that list.
so not that I need it distributed, but now on the website, the updated action list, so I
Updated
can,
action list
I can
up
get
there.
that, okay,
It's not up there yet, but it will be.
okay.
I just need to update it to say we've done everything.
Then you can check off one action item, okay. Is that it? That's it? Yes?
That's all we have.
Okay, Selectmen report.
We had another collective bargaining session this morning with the Medfield Police League, and we've scheduled a follow-up meeting for the week after next. If we are able to reach an agreement to present to the board and then the board approves it, the idea would be to present that contract to the special town meeting when the hospital to get what approvals are necessary
Good.
associated with the contract and get that done. So that's sort of the target we've set for ourselves in the discussions with the Medfield Police League. And then the Board of the Affordable Housing Trust, which took the summer off and now has 2 new members, is going to meet next Thursday, September 5th. One of the major agenda items is going to be to look at and work on the RFP for the Hinckley property for that development that was approved at town meeting last year. That also has to go through the Council on Aging, because as part of that article, Council on Aging gets to offer their comments on the RFP, and then it will come back to, ultimately to the board to issue and comment on all that. So for people who are interested in that, that will be discussed at the meeting next Thursday, which is at the DPW garage on North Meadows Road.
Good.
I think that's all that I have.
The Energy Committee met, and they've gotten very active in trying to push the town to adopt a stricter energy approach to building. And they started looking at the Medfield State Hospital development, trying to have some impact on that. This stricter energy code is, the part that I've heard about, that I've learned about, is called passive house. And it's just a much tighter building that saves you money in terms of energy use on the out years. It's a little more expensive, but the studies in Pennsylvania got really big apparently on energy efficiency. For their affordable housing, they afforded people points in their grading system if they were more energy efficient. And what they discovered is that because of the points, everybody was coming in with energy efficient projects. And as a result of that, the cost of doing this passive house standard has pretty much come to the same price as the actual building code standard in Pennsylvania. So it doesn't cost you any more to build to this higher standard in Pennsylvania was the lesson there. We'll see if that works in Massachusetts or not. But they're trying to reach out to the developers for the state hospital, the Rose Bay
Rose Bay.
on Pound Street, and Aura, is it now? That used to be Mayrock, to see if they would be interested in using these greater energy efficient building techniques. I've had a series of discussions with some neighbors in town about a couple of derelict houses that they were concerned with, and the fire chief and the building inspector actually went out today, I guess, and declared that one was a hazard, and so that they're going to send notice to the owner of that one. The other one was not a hazard, so that that's not going to be, no notice is going to go on that one. I've had a series of discussions with Carol Reed to try to find a Board of Health members, and that's actually ongoing still today. Townwide Master Planning Committee meeting is actually meeting tonight. I'm missing the meeting to be here with you guys. They had a review with the consultants, Community Circle, starting at 2 o'clock today. And Sarah put together this really interesting list of places that she was going to take them, which reads like it's sort of like an informational itemization of all the interesting things in town, things that are going on, things that you should see. If you haven't seen that list, it's worth just looking at her list that she put together of places she was going to take them for her. It was like a 2-hour bus drive. And what else? I had a personal experience as a reporter to the police. I actually called the police on. I saw some crime going on up in Medfield State Hospital. I saw 2 guys trying to break in 9 o'clock at night a couple Wednesdays, 3 Wednesdays ago. I was taking a walk because I'd gotten home from work and I needed to move. And so even though it was dark, I was walking up at Medfield State Hospital. I saw these suspicious people first driving a pickup truck being around a barrier, and I thought, oh, I noticed that. Then I saw people walking around with flashlights, and then as I came around the block, I heard breaking glass, and I thought, oh. And so that's when I called the police. And I later saw the 2 guys going around East Hall, and they had sacks. I saw them at that point, and flashlights. And so I had an interaction with the police department over that, which was very interesting as a user, because I am not often a user of the police department that way. And I actually acquired some information as a result of that I was able to share with the chief that the chief found useful. I found it interesting to have that interaction, and I had some suggestions to the police as to how to be more consumer-friendly in the future, so.
There wasn't a taser involved here,
So
was
Pete,
there?
your usual interaction with the police is in the backseat of the cruiser, is it?
Yes, I'm usually the one that they're hauling down to the station, that's right.
The suspect was known to the police.
All right. I've been on the road 3 weeks in a row now, so I haven't been around here much, but I actually sort of have questions. One of them, building on Pete's comment about buildings being condemned, I'm not sure whether you got the same message from Ann Thompson that I did, but the question is, if a residence is not well-maintained, so the grass is overgrown, there might be lawn equipment out in the front yard, so the place looks like a mess, what's the town's ability to act, or even desire to act? Because there's a line here, and this is, I guess, kind of a question for you, Mark. I drove by the house, and it's like, yeah, it's a mess, but it's not,
You basically have to have a maintenance bylaw, which we don't have.
which we don't have, so we don't
I
really.
mean, so it'd have to rise to the level of a public nuisance.
Yeah.
So here's an email from Mark Sorrell on this very point,
Ah.
which was generated by the query from the neighbors that, so that I didn't know the answer, so I reached out to Chris and Mark and got the answer from them. By the time Gary Pelletier responded to the residents with an email this week, he was citing chapter and verse of the Mass statutes, which I assumed
Building code.
got from you, but it was a very impressive response from Gary
Yeah.
to the neighbors, and they were very pleased with the interaction they had with Gary and the fire chief today.
Yeah, one of these I kind of know a little bit about. It's not all intentional.
No, not at all. One's very sad.
Yeah. Then the second question I had is whether either of you attended the public hearing on the Pound Street, the development on Pound Street. Either
I
one
did not. I was in Minnesota.
Okay. Okay. It's obviously, I look at that as on just the merits of the project and what appears to be in that project is a good development, but fully recognize the sensitivity of the neighborhood around the size. And I find this to be a dilemma because
It is.
because if the project in some form doesn't go, then one of our best opportunities both to achieve affordable housing targets and to provide senior housing it will probably go, will probably be gone. And it's a little bit like a rock and a hard place because the project that the neighbors would be sure they'd be comfortable with is a project that's not feasible. And the project that's feasible may or may not be, a good addition to the neighborhood.
So the ZBA put the developer on notice during the time periods that the town was at safe harbor,
Right.
but notwithstanding that they were prepared to go ahead and hear the developer out and make a determination as to
Okay.
whether it was in the town's interest.
I guess my point is that I feel a sense of urgency, or I feel a sense that this is a project that could do the town an awful lot of good. At the same time, I understand why the neighbors don't like it, and I'm sitting there going, I really hope we can find a way to make this thing work, because I think it's an important project.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
like the project as it's, as it's defined in terms of what it would be like for the people that would live there. I think they would really like living there. And I say that not to discount the neighborhood's concerns, but it's like, this is one of those where, it's a rock and hard place, but somewhere 10 years from now, we'll know what the right answer was. And by then, it would be too late if we picked the wrong path, I guess is what I'm saying.
And if it doesn't get built, then we're at risk then from unfriendly 40Bs as well.
Well, that's that too, and yeah, but anyway, bottom line is I was hoping that there was there need to be some additional ideas, I guess, on how to reconcile those two things, but I hope that project goes in some form or another. The only other comment I had was the Appalachian Mountain Club letter.
Yes.
Do we know, Pete, this is probably a question for you.
I know
do we
nothing about it.
You haven't, well, it was in the information.
Yeah,
packet.
oh yeah, I saw the letter, but I know nothing beyond the letter.
Okay. I would kind of like to know whether the folks that have requested this reimbursement are satisfied with this letter or not.
I have not heard from them yet.
Okay. Because
I
I'd like to
owe
know.
Tim Bonfatti a call.
Okay. And if they're happy, then I'm happy. If they're
Yep.
not, I understand why they might not be.
Yep.
And then we ought to talk about that.
The only other information I have is that I did view the cutting on the property. Joe showed it to me.
The part of the letter that irked me a little bit was that there's definitely a tone in there that basically says, well, the town didn't really make it easy. Basically, there's a lack of ownership in the wording that kind of worked me up a little bit. So it's not my issue if the people involved are happy. I'm happy. I'm an Appalachian Mountain Club member, but I did not like.
Well, that being
I-
said,
well-
we've got an unresolved issue as far as the original request for permission.
Right.
It's never been
I
finalized.
met with the Appalachian Mountain Club, and you are
Okay.
correct in assuming the tone taken, and that was the tone
Yeah.
of my meeting as well.
Yeah, and for an organization that depends on the goodwill of the communities that it would like to operate in, that's probably a counterproductive tone. Let's put it that way.
We had that similar
Okay.
conversation.
Okay. But I won't turn it into a fight if people are happy.
Either way, I asked the Appalachian Mountain Club to come back and see us in September because
Okay.
they do need a license for
Yeah.
where they cross in other spots.
How did the Appalachian Mountain Club morph from what was the Bay Circuit
It was a
Trail?
Bay Circuit Trail.
They took them over the Bay Circuit Trail, didn't have the money or they didn't have enough people to maintain the trail anymore, so Appalachian Mountain Club took it over.
It's a good organization, but this is one that's not
Yeah.
making me happy.
Well, these are not, it's not exactly Appalachian Mountain Club. What they historically have done, that's not really what the Bay Circuit Trail was about.
right.
So it's not a neat
Yeah.
fit, frankly.
Agreed.
Yeah, but they ought to understand maintaining good relationships with the communities you're relying upon.
Just a reminder, your meeting on Tuesday is at the high school in room 125.
Room 125.
Oh,
125.
thank
Will it be
you.
televised?
I don't believe we're gonna be able to go out live.
You know, where is that in relation to the library, you know?
It's
That corridor that runs
Yeah,
off
it's
the
right around
opposite
library.
the library, like straight down the hall. It's a very nice room.
It's very nice, and it's a good
Very big
room for
room.
a big working session like
Is
this.
that the one where they did the mitigation?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
that
had
is a good room.
Some of our
It's a good size room.
Legion meetings there as well for
Yeah.
the Affordable Housing Trust. It's a good room.
All right, do we have anything else?
That's it for this evening.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, folks.
Thank you.
You're watching Medfield TV.